pediatrician, a Zionist activist, and a visionary in her own rights. Vera Weizmann was a private woman, and she asked that during her lifetime, her correspondence should be destroyed. So what we know about her is about the biography that she penned together with David Tutov, secondhand information, and from her public works, her deeds, her institutions that she set up. My name is Ellie Paran. I'm a volunteer guide in this magnificent house designed by Erich Mendelsohn. The house was built during the years of 1936-37, built as a family's private residence, and it continued until February 1949, when Dr. Chaim Weizmann was sworn in to be the first president of the State of Israel. And then it became the official presidential residence. I'd like to make a note that the family paid for the house, the work of the architect, and all that you see in the house from their own private means, from the royalties of Chaim Weizmann's patents in organic chemistry. And the house continued to be the official presidential residence until the death of Chaim Weizmann in 1952, at which point it reverted back to being the private residence of his widow, Vera, and since then, all of the Israeli presidents have been living in Jerusalem. Now, this visit has been planned, well planned, as we are going through challenges now with the pandemic. The Weizmann family also faced many challenges which impacted their lives, their dreams, what they were able to carry out, and how. Now, I'd like to talk about Vera Katzman, who was born in 1881, one of 7 children to Isaiah and Theodosia Schatzman in Rostov-on-the-Don. Her father, Isaiah, had served in the Tsar's Imperial Army, served his 25 years, and therefore was granted the privilege of living beyond the pale of settlement. Vera had a totally middle-class upbringing. She had a French-speaking governess, piano lessons, and a secular education. All of the siblings had secular education. However, the 2 brothers also received Judaic studies. At the age of 14, Vera came to a crossroads in her life. She had to choose between music or medicine, and she decided she would go for medicine. Now, Imperial Russia in those days had a quota system for how many Jewish students would be accepted for higher education. Therefore, the Jewish students at the time looked west, and Vera was accepted for medicine in Geneva. The Jewish students had a union in Geneva, and there they had exchange of political ideas, there were meals, there was a self-help organization, and it was here that she met Chaim Weizmann, who helped her with chemistry. The rest we know. I'm going to take you now to the family's favorite room, the library, and continue. The library has over 1,000 books. And as you can see, these books are the best wallpaper that you can imagine. They reflect the 4 languages that Vera spoke. We're speaking about Russian, French, English, and German. I would like you to take a look now at these desks. The 2 of them, this is Vera's in the middle and Chaim by the wall. Vera was the one who was involved in designing the house, and we see how she has the best position here with her back to the books. And I would like to remind you that each language, think of it as a key, because it can open up another door. Now, let's look at let's look at Vera's desk here. And we see on one side the family. The eldest son, Benji, born, lived in England, buried in Ireland. He had one child, David, the only grandson of the family, who today is in his 80s and lives also in England. The young son, Michael here, was a pilot in the RAF. His plane was downed in February of 1942, listed as disappeared. He was missing in action. The family bore this burden silently for two reasons. First of all, it was hope. They always hoped that he would be found, either as a prisoner in a German camp, perhaps he had a lapse of memory, perhaps he had been hidden somewhere. And the second reason was, because he was the son of Dr. Chaim Weizmann, he could be used for political propaganda, and they wanted to spare him this. Vera kept her son close to her. If we look on Chaim Weizmann's desk here, we will see a photo of her with her son's RAF pin in her hat. She saw to it that she incorporated his insignia in her clothing, silently bearing her grief. The people on the other side of Vera's desk are friends of the family. It's very good to have these kind of friends. And I would like to stop with a picture here of the Albert Einstein. I think we're not used to seeing him with so much hair. He and Vera got along famously when the two families went together to the United States for a fundraising tour for the Hebrew University. I'm talking about 1921. On the bottom of the photo, inscription, very hard to read in German, that he dedicates to Vera, our humorous queen, friendly and in awe, June of 1921. The two of them got along much better than Albert Einstein got along with Chaim Weizmann. And now you're asking yourself, why did Chaim Weizmann take Albert Einstein with him in 1921 for this fundraising tour? Well, it has to do with what happened to Albert Einstein in 1921. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize. He was a superstar of the time. Everyone wanted to see him. Everyone wanted to hear him. And they came. Friend of Michael Weizmann, and their friendship continued on. After his graduation, this 21-year-old became a correspondent and had a motorcycle tour through Eastern Europe, Lebanon, and Israel. And he was here in the house, staying with Vera for a few days, discussing with her the merits of continuing on to Russia, and then his need for a dictionary, Russian, English. He took his motorcycle and went on to buy this book. Unfortunately, we're talking about the years of the Arab Revolt. And he was caught in an attack on a Jewish bus, and he was behind on his motorcycle and the only fatality. This was a terrible loss for Vera, as they had a very close relationship. With the family's influence and request, he was buried in the Ramleh military cemetery, and Vera, when she was here, would go every year at the time of his death and lay a wreath on his grave. The other people that we see here on the desk, these friends of the family, these political friends, are very interesting and important people. There's Churchill, and there will be Lloyd George, who Chaim met already when he was in Manchester in 1906. The middle gentleman, Lloyd George, also became an acquaintance, a friend of the family. And this was through Vera's work in Manchester, when she was one of the very few female physicians working in a setup dealing with infant nutrition and weight. And she met the influential editor of the Manchester Guardian, Mr. Charles Scott. Vera then introduced Chaim to Charles Scott, and in turn, this friendship led to Mr. Scott introducing Chaim to powerful men, powerful political men in positions of influence. And Lloyd George was one of these, who later went on to being the Prime Minister of England, and his support was most important for the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration, here we have Lord Balfour, with kindest regards to my friend Chaim Weizmann. A close relationship, good exchange of ideas, both appreciated the others. We're now going to carry on to what we call our history room. It was a room for the visitors to the house to freshen up before they went to see Chaim Weizmann. And today, we have placards describing the family. The middle one, of course, describes the public works of Vera, and I'm going to continue there. The middle board, Dr. Vera Weizmann. Before she became a physician, a few more paths that she had to go through. Chaim Weizmann moved to Manchester in 1904 to accept a position there. Vera had 2 more years to continue her studies, in which she completed successfully. They married in Germany and carried on to live in Manchester. Vera gave birth to her first son, Benji there, was involved not only in running the family, being a hostess, she also needed to learn English and German, as this was the language that Chaim spoke with his Zionist activists. The time came that Vera understood that she had to supplement the family income if they were going to continue in the same style. Perhaps there were other motives too, we don't know. And Vera returned for courses, 2-year courses, to get her certification, which she did successfully. I want you to think of Manchester now in those years. It was an industrial city with neighborhoods that were like a page from a story of Charles Dickens. Vera found work in 2 institutions dealing with maternity issues, women's issues, and also infants' nutrition. She gained expertise in this area. And as a result of her work, of course, she met Mr. Scott. Another important personality that she met was Rebecca Zeev, who was married to a Zionist activist. Rebecca Zeev also was another very strong woman. The family's friendship continued on when both families moved to London. Chaim moved first in 1915 for his work on acetone, and Vera finished her contract in Manchester and joined him with Benjamin. At this point, it was another crossroad in her life. Chaim was so famous that she had to put her career aside in order to be the woman behind the man, the hostess. However, with her continued friendship with Rebecca Zeev, she became involved in the British Women's Federation. And this very important group of women, had an idea that they would be able to help empower women so they could help themselves, and it was not a charity organization. The first thing one of the first things this commission did was to send a fact-finding group to Israel, Palestine, and the women involved in this group were Rebecca Zeev, Edith Eder, and Dr. Vera Weizmann, with her expertise, of course, in infant nutrition. The women were appalled at the conditions that they found, that the pioneers and the old and the others in the community had. We're talking about the neglect of the Ottoman Empire, the disease, and the famine. They returned to London, and with it was born the Women's International Zionist Organization. We're talking about 1920, so it's 100 years now that WIZO has been in operation, a welfare group which has effected change in generations and children. Vera was involved in other groups. For instance, her interest in rehabilitation of soldiers came through with her partnership of Dr. Shiva of the Tel Shomer Hospital. And in addition, she helped found Beit for the rehabilitation of soldiers in America. She was active in Magen David Adom, youth immigration. And if you look at the picture, you see another powerful woman here. This is Eleanor Roosevelt, with the eyes and ears for her husband, President F.D.R. Roosevelt. Now, in the 1950s, we had the last world outbreak of polio. Vera, in addition to working on an organization to help the individuals who came down with polio, allowed the use of the northern part of her estate as a summer camp. And this ran for over 10 years. The children, in addition to getting therapy, there was a therapeutic pool dug, also had recreation and a hot meal, which they received from Vera's kitchen. During the time of the austerity, each child received a fresh egg per day and not from the egg bank. And lastly, we can see appeals from the public. The problems are the same as today. Difficulty in living situations, need for employment, and the mother asking for supplement for lessons for her very gifted son. This was Pinchas Zuckerman's mother. Each letter was acknowledged. If a solution could be found, it was worked on with the person who sent the letters. And now, on the last row, I want to point out to you that we have here Chaim Weizmann's passport. It's number 0001. Vera's is 0002, and it is in the archives. We're now going to walk out and pass the dining room again. This is a wonderful size to have conversations, and the accordion door would be closed to facilitate the privacy. At the end of the meal, the accordion door would be open, and the visitors would carry on to the salon. I'd like to point out this beautiful picture on the wall, which was presented to the family during their visit to South Africa in 1931-32 in the winter. Vera became involved with some political intrigue because conflicting interests regarding the setting up of WIZO. It was worked out. In the end, WIZO does have a branch in South Africa, and the families present here has been displayed in the dining room. It's a lovely picture of the Transvaal, and there are some problems that can be worked out. Vera did have a success with this. So now we're going to go on to the salon. We followed the visitors to the salon to finish up the small hours of the evening with conversation, with a brandy, and music, which Vera played on the Steinway piano. She was an accomplished hostess. And afterwards, after the quiet and the peace and the good feelings, Chaim Weizmann would continue his conversations about the need for the country and all the institutions that we need. As we go out, I want to point out to you the difference in the interior design between the West Wing, where Vera brought her European furniture with her, and the East Wing, where the architect Erich Mendelssohn got his corner to influence the design. And here we can see the honor that he gave to the East, from the shape of the sofas, the stripes, the fringes, the turquoise color. This all gives a feeling of flavor of the East. And it is in this corner that we understand about the conflict between these two strong personalities, Erich Mendelssohn and Dr. Vera Weizmann. Mendelssohn wanted to design the whole house, the interior and the exterior, down to the spoon. Vera had different ideas because she said she's going to be the one to live here. The two strong personalities stopped speaking, and Mendelssohn never came to the house to see the final product. So you're probably thinking, okay, she's taken us to see the dining room. We had our brandy, but what about the kitchen? We're going to go there now. Mendelssohn divided the area according to tasks. There will be 2 rooms. Your first room on the left is just for washing up, and the farthest room will be the room where the cooking was carried out. There is a division between the 2 tasks, reasons of hygiene. Now, pay attention, there's a little step up, and we're going to get in there. And we're going to look into the washing up room. Yes, the Crusade has been around since 1927, and Vera staff also used these pots. They held up well. Now, we're going into the kitchen. Look at this fantastic light, which is here, and the size. You're asking, did Vera cook? No, she did not cook in this kitchen. She had a staff. However, she took a cooking course in the Cordon Bleu one summer. And Vera had cordial relations with her staff, and some of them were remembered in her will. Take a look at the wonderful pieces and imagine what was served in them. Must have been fantastic. Does this remind you of IKEA? And these wonderful drawers. Yes, the kitchen is designed along the lines of the Frankfurt kitchen. Frankfurt kitchen is a work of an Austrian female domestic engineer. The size is not as big in the original. On the way out, I want to share with you that one of Lisa's projects was a cookbook for new immigrant women. It actually with the pros they have not seen, and how to make do the supplies which were available at the time. The book had 3 editions: Hebrew, English, and German. I'm holding up the one that says How to Cook in Israel, and the English one was How to Cook in Palestine, Israel. I think this is a very common phenomenon because I know of immigrant women to Israel who learn to cook with room service, including myself. Very important. So now we're going to carry on back to the salon. That's the foyer. One never finishes with the Weizmann family. Our colleagues in the archives update us when they come across something new as they do their continuing work in the family's correspondence. And a few months ago, the last biography of Dr. Chaim Weizmann, the founder, years 1922 to 1952, written by Professors Moti Golan and Yuda Reinhardt, came out in Hebrew. The English version will come out next year. And so we've come to the end of our tour now. I hope I've given you food for thought about Dr. Vera Weizmann, our First Lady, the challenges that she faced, and how she dealt with them. The title that she chose for her biography sums up the journey. The impossible takes longer. Farewell and keep safe.